then what do we have to be? If it's not God that we're asked to be human. And the irony is how little we know about what the role of a human being is. And I want to play devil's advocate for a moment. Forgive me. We'll play devil's advocate. So your child comes to you and asks, what's the meaning of life? Fair question. So you say, listen, two people come together, they decide they love each other, and together they conceive a baby when the timing is right. And then they bring a baby into this world. Please God, the pregnancy works well. And then the parents try to give the kids as much options, as much opportunities as possible to be successful. They throw things at the kid. They'll take the kids to extramurals. They'll do whatever they possibly can to make the kid succeed and do the best under the circumstances. We put the effort. We send them to the best schools. We hope that the kid was born with a decent IQ. I remember one time someone told me, he says, the only reason to marry somebody smart is not so that they could argue with you, it's that your kid should be smart. Bit of a mean statement, but having smart kids definitely helps them in life. So you have this, you make sure they get the best education, the best skills, the best values, and then at some stage, they hopefully mature, a very weird, undefined process over many years where the child goes from a dependent little infant to a very independent, at least in their mind, human being with opinions and everything. And one day, please God, you have the opportunity and you take this little boy or girl, you walk them down the aisle, and they look into the eyes of their new spouse, and their eyes are glowing because they're going to have the marriage that nobody's had before. And let's play best case scenario. They do have a wonderful marriage, and they also bring their own little kitties into this world, and they change a lot of nappies and try to make a living and move from one job to the other job, try to figure out where to live, the best place to live. They emigrate, they from this place to that place, they set themselves up, they join a community, hopefully they send their kids to a school, and slowly but surely their kids grow up, and this little fellow is now middle-aged and starting to get aches and pains. As someone one time told me, if you're 70 and you wake up and you don't feel anything, that means you're dead. Some people will say it's even 40. So yeah, that they slowly age and they go into the sunset of their life, and they have grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and they have nachas, and unfortunately they have a little health issue here and a health issue, a scare there, and a few bumps in the road of their life. And one day, please God, at 99 or 110, whatever, the time comes and they breathe their last, and we wrap them in shrouds, put them in a box, and park them forever in West Park. So let me ask, sorry for that very morbid imagination. But let me ask you a simple question. What was the point of all that? Doesn't that ever weird you out? It's like, bring a child into this world, starts off nothing, just, tiny egg. After death, eventually they decay and they're, again, pretty much nothing. They start nothing, they finish nothing. In the middle, they think there is something. They have experiences of love and connection and pain and hurt and frustration and et cetera, et cetera. And then what? And then what? Like, why do we go through this? Life is such a strange journey to go through. If you think about it objectively, ask yourself a simple question. Why, if a soul came to you right now and said, I'm thinking of entering into an embryo, I'm thinking of entering into a fetus and then being born, would you recommend me to go down this route? What would you say? You would say yes, because life is full of joy and happiness. Okay. But if they say, really, like, what's the point? I mean, I'm going to go through so much effort. I have to go through growing 9 months in the womb. I have to go through the pain of birth. I have to go through the pain of being a dependent child and then a angry toddler and a very confused post-toddler. I'm pretty much describing each kid of mine, different stage of their life, and going into primary school, scared little kid, and and dealing with emotions and dealing with being liked and not liked and self-definition, and then getting ready for high school and all the puberty. Why? And you would say, yes, but there's still so many moments of beauty. But is it worth it? If they asked you sincerely, is it worth it? Is there a reason I should go down this route? What would you tell them? Would you say, oh yeah, sure, it's a piece of cake? Or if you're honest with yourself, you'll say, that's a tough question. Now that you made me think about it, don't know. It's a funny thing about life because pretty much nobody condones suicide. We don't think suicide's a good thing, so we think that life is worth protecting. On the other hand, we're not big fans of bringing a lot of little peoples into this world because of overpopulation and because, like when you hear about another dysfunctional person who brought a child into this world, you're like, ooh, gosh, there goes another, mess up. So once a person's here, we don't want them to leave. Before they're here, we're not sure we want them to come. Once they're dead, we're sorry they left. I know I'm being a bit callous about something very emotional, but for argument's sake, let's just try. I'm trying to keep emotion out of it. Like, oh my gosh, you heard the rabbi had a 9th child. Ooh, gosh, okay. Why in the world? Okay, never mind. Then, heaven forbid, somebody loses a child. Oh, what a tragedy. So bringing the kid into the world was half a tragedy. Losing that kid, heaven forbid, is a tragedy. Do we want people to be born? Do we not want people to be born? Do we see having children like puppies? You have like 1 or 2, they just offer you comfort and you raise them well because one day they'll decide which old age home you'll go into. Do we see life as a gift? Do we see life as a burden? Do we see life as a gamble? Might be good. 20% chance that this person's going to be born healthy, have good marriages, have good marriage, have good intelligence, be good looking enough, be friendly, not be confronted by any crazy act of violence or sickness. We'll play the chances. Yeah, kind of chances. Okay, maybe I'll give the gamble. Is that how we see life? Is a life of pain a less worthy life than a life of comfort and blessing? If we're deeply honest with ourselves, we have and I'm saying all of us, we have very confused and ambivalent feelings about life. It's not so simple. On the one hand, it's terrible when someone dies. On the other hand, we're not so sure we're excited when someone's born. When we look at somebody dysfunctional having a child, we're like, not sure if that's a good idea. On the other hand, we have empathy for people that are going through deep challenges. We're confused. In the words of Ethics of Our Fathers, Al karcha chatachai, you are born against your will. No child is given the choice whether they want to be born. Ve'al karcha chatameis, and against your will, you die. No one asks, whatever. Obviously, a person, heaven forbid, could choose death, but ultimately, death comes when it comes. So it's almost like life and death is this tug of war. We want it, we don't want it. We think it's a gift. Sometimes we think it's a burden. Sometimes it breaks us and pushes us onto our knees in absolute agony. Sometimes it makes us walk with our shoulders strong and broad because we're feeling on top of the world. Like, think about it. Your happiest moment in your life and your saddest moment in your life. Try to imagine yourself in those two moments, like two different human beings. One is standing and just feeling on top of the world, not invincible, and the other one is literally feeling like a boulder just fell on their back and they could barely hold it up. So life really takes us onto a messy, very messy journey. And I don't have all the answers. I'm not even sure I have many answers, but I have Torah's wisdom has given me an answer or two about why we go through this. Deep down, why do we do this? Even if we can't articulate to the reason, why do we go through life? Why do we have such a strong will to live? Why is suicide seen as abnormal, as beyond the pale, as something that people don't do? And when it happens, heaven forbid, we question it because it's against. But why? Life is tough. Quit. If you have a job, you don't like the job, quit. You have a marriage, you don't like the marriage, divorce. And yet life is seen differently. Fundamentally, although we think that we were born because, an embryo was created and therefore it just turned into a baby, we were born because our soul in heaven, which was there for a long time, at some stage God decided that this soul needs to not only sit and rest on its wonderful couch in heaven and feeling spiritual, it must be challenged. It must be fought with. It must fight, and through that fight, the soul gets elevated, and the body in which the soul will come into will get elevated, and through that, the entire world will get elevated. In other words, tension. The more tension there is between soul and body, and the more we overcome and fight our body, the more positive energy we infuse into ourselves and into the world, and through that, the world, which is a place that is, at least superficially, full of darkness, that's how we fight the darkness, through resistance. Our resistance to the darkness pushes away the darkness. That's what we're told. So each time I am challenged by something and an impulse, a weakness, I want to gossip, I want to, not live up to my higher self. I want to be a body, not a soul. Each moment I'm tempted and I overcome that temptation, my soul pushes positive energy into me and into this world. And what happens is, collectively, after many generations of people fighting that fight and pushing that tension, pulling at that rope, eventually the world has enough positive energy to literally push the darkness out, exile out, Mashiach, redemption in. That's pretty much the 3-minute version of life. In other words, let's unpack what I just said. You can unpack it for years, but in short, let's unpack what we just said. We are born because we have a purpose. Often we're not sure what that purpose is, or rather we know what the purpose is, to add light, but we don't know how it's going to play out. For some people, adding the light goes through tremendous pain, loss, divorce, sadness, illness, physical illness, mental illness, violence, whatever. For other people, that tension happens in a much less dramatic way, the simple tensions of a tough marriage, or even a good marriage that's a bit challenging, the toughness of raising children, the toughness of earning a living, the toughness of staying humble, the toughness of being kind, the challenge of being in control of our own thoughts. Each one of us is fighting battles. Some battles are more dramatic and maybe harder, although it's very hard to define what's hard and what's easy, because each one of us is also given a very different skill set of how we show up to those battles. And in those moments of tension, and again, they're not dramatic moments, they're every single moment. It's the moment just before I came on, what was I going to do during that second? It's now while I'm talking to you, making sure that I don't get distracted by anything. I'm fully focused on an idea I'm trying to formulate. It's the battle of what to eat and what not to eat. It's every second of the day. Think about it. Every second of the day, you're making a choice. And often, pretty much almost every choice is between the easy and the stretch. You know, yeah, you could work regular, or you could put yourself really into your work. You could call your friend and have a chat and just chit chat, or you could really try to bond. You can create a meal, or you could create a meal that's nutritious and that set a tone at the meal that hopefully people walk out of that dinner feeling more connected rather than just stuffed a piece of chicken down their throat. Each second, we are making decisions. Often we don't realize we're making decisions. What do you mean? I'm making dinner. That's not a decision. That's what I do every day. Okay, making dinner. I'm taking a shower, brushing my teeth. But everything can be done the extra mile. Everything can be done going out of our comfort zone in the smallest way. You know, get out of the shower, go on, move on, do things. Whatever it is, you know, each second calls upon us to show up fully or to not show up fully, to rush, to slow down, whatever the moment is calling. And in those moments of tension, you're being pulled, you're being stretched, your character is being stretched. Often, you know, we do stretches and we think we're stretching our body, and that's of course important. You have to stretch your body, otherwise you'll feel what I just felt when I stretched. To stretch. But what about stretching your character? What about stretching your animal? What about stretching your patterns, your habits, your thought processes? Think about it. Just like if you don't stretch your body, very often you become stiff, and eventually you can barely move. You're just rigid and just become more and more tight. So too with your character. If we don't stretch our character, then we just become narrower and narrower and more rigid and more predictable. I often say, like, most marriages are so predictable. You walk in, he says that, she reacts that way. He says that, she reacts that way. She says that, he reacts that way. The child comes in, they both react that way. And it's like deja vu over and over and over. And you walk in and you're like, is this February 2021 or is this, you know, April 1994? Not much has changed. The people have aged, but it's pretty much the same dynamics. And like everyone's just triggering each other. It's like you know, like a domino effect. He said that, or she said that, and that happened, and that happened, and that happened. Everyone's just playing their role, filling into the role. You know, I remember one time someone told me, he says, him and his brothers, they're all big, you know, successful people. But when they come back home, they all live away from where they originally grew up. When they come back to their home where they grew up, they all fall right back into the pit of being 8-year-olds and 12-year-olds. And it's like deja vu all over again. And you're like, whoa, it's like a total domino game. Like all the maturity is out the window and everyone's over each other. That's what happens when we don't stretch. Okay, obviously, you know, sometimes you go to a home and it does trigger certain things. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying, but in general, day to day, often we become extremely predictable. Like for me, it offends me. I don't know why, but like when my wife will tell me or my sibling will tell me, gosh, lady, that was so predictable. I'm like, ah, I hate hearing that. And sometimes it's true. Like, come on, man. Does that mean I didn't grow up on that? Like if, you know, like, for example, a sibling will tell you something and right away you'll go into preaching mode. because you see yourself as the preacher of the family. And they're like, okay, lady, there you go again. And I'm like, no, did I have to? Maybe I could have surprised them and this time just listen without any advice. That's what I mean, rigidity. When everything's like, there's no choices anymore. I don't realize, one second, I have a choice. I don't have to do that. I don't have to act that way. I don't have to be triggered in this way, which leads to this thing. I don't have to be a domino game. I could think. And at that moment when I think, I am pushing godliness into this world. Because whenever I stretch my character, the world gets stretched as well. This is a basic concept of Tanya that we've been exploring the last few days for those who go to the daily Tanya. This idea of iskafia, breaking oneself, breaking one's character, overcoming impulse. And when you do that, you push positivity into this world. When you stretch, the world stretches. And you could talk about this from a spiritual perspective, and I'll give you a very physical, a very tangible example. I've seen this over and over in a family dynamic. Families, as I said, get very entangled, and everybody plays their role, and it's everybody, triggering each other. Often what happens is one family member decides to go on a journey, self-awareness, therapy, spirituality, whatever. And they slowly but surely start pushing out different energy because they're no longer predictable. So their part in the dynamic has changed. And slowly but surely, everything starts shifting. Especially in a family where everything's so entangled and so, so many layers. Everything depends on each other. So each child adds a certain flavor. That's why, for example, when a child leaves home, the whole home changes because everybody puts their dynamic into the circle and the circle feeds off each other. But if one person changes, then everything shifts because the circle has moved. The circle is no longer like this. There's a bump, and then everybody feels that bump, and then everybody ends up flowing differently. When you stretch, everything stretches around you. That's why it says, change yourself, change the world. It's true. Not only in some spiritual way or butterfly effect, because you're changing your energy, and then the people around you are being affected by that energy, and automatically, trickle, 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 it's the energy is reaching everybody. Obviously, watered down, but we're constantly pushing energy into the world. And COVID, unfortunately, has given us a great example. We're constantly pushing particles. Or Shane, I'm sure you saw the conspiracy that if you blow into a computer, it might give you COVID. The other side. No, that's not going to happen. And I don't have COVID. But, you push an energy, and just the little particles you blow without a mask, poof, this affects that, arm 1.0, and it starts repeating, and this and that, and the variants, and the world is transformed. Because that's what we're doing. Just with COVID, we now see it, even though most of us cannot see COVID, but like we've seen under the microscope what COVID looks like. One person pushes out and stretches the whole world. The whole world starts getting affected by that air that came out of that one person. We all have an opportunity to stretch this world. And that happens when we stretch ourselves, becoming better people, a better version of ourselves, becoming kinder, more forgiving, more learned, more wise, more patient, more empathetic, more selfless, more genuine and authentic, more mindful of God and purpose, more gentle, more passionate, etc., etc., etc. And as we do that, we literally start shifting this world. We shift. And we shift our own energy and we start attracting different energy. I believe in that. Although I'm not a spiritual person, I don't consider myself a spiritual person. I don't feel spiritual energies, etc. I know from my own life that when you change your energy, the world shifts around you. You suddenly start attracting different kinds of people and different kinds of relationships and different kinds of zones. If I'm feeling insecure, I'm going to struggle to build relationships with healthy people. Healthy people will come around me and they'll be like, okay, spare me, no need. If I'm feeling secure in myself, then other people will feel secure in my presence. People who are secure in themselves will feel comfortable. They won't be threatened. And slowly but surely, relationships develop. I know in myself, when was I able to start developing friendships? Once I started becoming my own friend. When I suffered insecurity, I had no friends. I didn't attract the right people. I didn't show up the right way. And yes, it would have been nice if somebody was compassionate and was my friend, even if, you know, I was so unappealing as a friend. But nevertheless, it's understandable. I change my energy and then everything shifts. For example, they always say, give a job to a busy person. You know, what happens? You want to do good community work, volunteer work. And what happens is eventually you start trying out different people, this person lets you down, this person shows up. Eventually that energy leads to another energy. And before long, that person is, you know, affecting and changing lives. That person showed up with a aura of responsibility, and then everything starts shifting in the most incredible way around that individual. So here's my take-home message. My take-home message is, during this time of COVID, is the perfect time for us to grow, to be stretched, to be able to, that, you know what the greatest compliment someone could tell you is, I believe, wow, you've come a long way. Mom, these past 6 months, you've changed. It's so much lighter and easier. Isn't that the greatest compliment? To know that you put the work in, and now you look at yourself months, years later, and you're like, I've actually grown. I've actually matured. I've actually made myself into somebody who's stretching themselves and thus stretching the world. And in those moments, if that's how we live, then the way we started, the question we asked, what's the point of this all? Why do we go through life? It's obvious. Stretch. Is life worth it? Absolutely. Do we know how life is going to stretch us? No. But each of my children, of our children, I look at them and yes, I sometimes feel bad for the world that they're in. But on the other hand, I have no regrets. Not only because I love them, but because they're now on their journey. They've been given the chance to embark on their life. And they'll be stretched in their ways. I beg Hashem that it shouldn't be painful, but they'll be stretched. And through that, they'll make this world a better place. And truly, that makes every moment of life worth living. Shkoyach, everybody, and